Salles. Well, I think they like the movie. What do you think? Walter, I would love to start with a question for you. This is, an adaptation of a book, but more than that, it's a personal story for you because you knew this family, you spent time in this wonderful house, which is a character in the film in the 60s. So please tell us a little bit about that, first of all.
Good evening. So incredible to see a cinema full of people this morning. Obrigado. Yes, when I was 13 years old, the country was living under military dictatorship, and I have to confess that I was pretty much at loss, until I met this family. Thanks to the mid-sister of the 5 brothers and daughters. Nalu is her name. The one girl that goes to help her father's shirt when the military police in civilian clothes is in the house already. And she brought me into the house, and in fact she brought me into Brazil. Because in that house, political discussions were everywhere and were passionating. Music was constantly playing on the turntable. This is how I got to fully understand, how extraordinary Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, Gal Costa, Tom Zé, all of these geniuses of Brazilian culture were and what they meant. And also it was a house where there was a proximity of the body, a kind of affection and a kind of an honesty in the relationships that really touched me very much. But I wasn't the only one, because we all drifted to that house. You imagine 5 kids with the friends of each one of those kids, father and mother, so there were always 25, 30 people in that house. So the film stems from the memories I have from that house in the moments of luminosity, but also from the darkness, from the moment where Rubens is taken. And obviously from this extraordinary book written by Marcelo Rubens, who really opened up a complete understanding and layers that I had no idea of, from the disappearance of the father on. We knew at some point what happened, little by little we knew, but we had no understanding of what happened 30 years later. And this is when Eunice's journey starts, and that was extraordinary. When I finished to read the book, I was completely aghast, and I wasn't sure I should adapt it to start with, because of how much I was touched, and perhaps I thought, am I too close to this, So there were moments of doubt. And then it took 7 years to be here. 7 years for the adaptation and the film to be done.
We're very glad that you overcome that doubt and gave us this beautiful film. Thank you. Fernanda, what was your sort of knowledge of this family and Eunice as a character? How did you arrive at this story?
I think I first knew Eunice as the mother of Marcelo. I don't know who here, you're all really young. So when I was your age, Marcelo released this amazing book about how he lost the movements of his body and how he was recovering, and his doubts if he could have sex. So it was so shocking to have that young, beautiful boy who had a recent tragedy. speaking so lively and so happily about life. And Eunice at that time was her mother, and also the widow of Rubens Paiva, who we knew just that his father, Marcelo's father, had died because he was kidnapped, arrested, tortured, and killed by the dictatorship. So when Marcelo released the book, I went to finally understand what happened to his family, because I really wanted to know. And I discovered there that with him, I think, because it's a book about that the real heroine of the house was that Eunice, that I knew as a widow and as a mother, that she was this great woman who, and a woman, and I think that teach Marcelo how to smile even when he lost the movement of his body. So such a key woman for now. I mean, when we're all afraid, when we're all living this very strange time, another dystopic time like the Cold War was for her, how to embrace family, love, happiness. She's a hell of a woman, I think.
And your performance, your engagement with her journey over time, over the decades, is really extraordinary. I'm wondering if you could give us some insight into tapping into that. Did you have different ways to engage with Eunice as she's progressing in the journey, and the distance from her husband obviously grows? She's gaining more strength and confidence. What were some of the markers in your performance that you were?
The first thing I think was we didn't want to betray her. No, Walter, because we said it's a woman that never cried publicly, because she thought that to become a victim was a way for the dictatorship to win over her. So we could not make a melodrama. That was our first, we cannot make it. And then I remember, I like the way in the film, in the beginning, she's like an extra in the house. She serves the coffee, she puts the children to sleep. And I just had to say, at what time does she come back? And Walter told me, less. At what time does she come back? And Walter told me, Nanda, trust me, less. And then from then on, we started this journey of restraining emotion, of working in my femininity, and trying to feel. And this, I think, has to do with the documentarist that Walter is. And as he lived in that house, he could not stand that. I think seeing, reacting. He really wanted us just to be, and we shot chronologically, so he really created an environment for us to just be. It's something really new in my life, I think.
Thank you. And Walter, I want to talk a little bit more about the creation of this house, because I'm obsessed with this house. I wish I was neighbors with the people who live in this house. You create it so palpably, and there's a sensory feeling as soon as you're around it. You can almost smell the salt water because everybody's coming in with their bathing suits. So what went into creating it in such a lived-in, such a detailed manner as you remember it?
When I was 13 again, I felt embraced by the people in that house, I felt invited to be part of that family, and somehow I tried to extend that invitation. And the way to extend that invitation was to create a livingness in that house. So 3 weeks prior to shoot, we started to live in that house. The kids, they had never acted before. The younger kids. And 2 of the actresses were doing the first film, or maybe the second film. So we also created a texture by little playing with scenes that were not anymore in the screenplay, or that were scenes that we wrote to precede the beginning of the screenplay, just to create a link, texture in the family itself. And then we invited the actors to actually finish the artwork in each of the rooms that they occupied. So it was the idea of transferring everything to them, even dialogue, to actually embrace dialogue in their own words, little by little. And that, I think, created something quite unique in making of the film. And in every single take, when we started to shoot, in every single take, I tried to change a line, I tried to change a movement, so that no take would be a repetition of another take. That every time something would be fresh and new, and somehow you had the same sense of immediacy of being there, and there's something almost tactile that I remember from my youth. It's very long ago, but I still remember from my youth in that house.
And it's not only a film that's set in a period, but it also looks like a film that could have been shot in that period. You shot around 35 millimeters. So tell us a little bit about those visual decisions, and maybe a second part to that is the Super 8 videos that we see. Are those based on actual videos, or how much of it was fictional?
So, the two aspects. The 35 mil had to do with the fact that I didn't want to have anything that would be artificial in this film. It was too close to home to be artificial, and so what the 35 brings is the grain and the texture of that era, without having to add artificial grain, for instance. And it also brings something that is really important in cinema, which is focus. When you're shooting on film, you're not going to take, do take 100, take 99. And so as we're doing only 2 or 3 takes of each moment, it was an incredible focus. And we were a very small group in that house, and that helped a lot, not only to create the look of the time, of the spirit of the time, and the kind of immediacy of the time. The Super 8 is part of the research that we did. We found like dozens of films, of family films, shot in Super 8. And they revealed 2 things that were extraordinary. First was the human geography of Rio de Janeiro in that era, which was very specific. How people looked, how their hair was, how thin they were actually. But behind the human geography of those family films, there was a country under siege. You could see the military in the back. And I said, okay, if we add those 2 things, we're going to add texture to the film. And this is when the idea of giving a camera to Veroca, the oldest daughter, came into the picture. Also because the family, Marcelo's family, the Paiva family, had so many photos that started to surface. But the Super 8 felt more like it. And the Super 8 has also the beauty of incorporating mistakes, errors, thus life. So things that breathe into the film. Most of what you see there's nothing from the period. There's 0 Super 8 from the period. It's all created as we shot, and the actors shot a lot of what you see on screen.
Thank you.
I remember when I saw you went to London with Valentina, and he came back and you showed me the Super 8 you've made there, and I thought, it's really bad. I didn't tell you that. Wow.
How the secret comes out. Fernanda, can you tell us a little bit about working as a part of and leading this wonderful ensemble? Walter mentioned that a lot of these actors haven't acted before. What was your process of becoming such a believable family that we see.
You know, in the beginning, because so many kids, and each one has a name and a nickname and a name that we all so I was with Selton, like, trying to remember the names, and we couldn't attach a name to a face. Then finally, we had the actresses, and the amazing Marcelo. And when I ended up the movie, I knew them as they were my children. It's unbelievable, and each one for a different reason. Valentina, who is, I call her Greta Garbo, she's beautiful, she's wonderful, talented. I used to say, you bitch. So I had like Paul's. But then you had Luisa and Barbara, they were like beginning, and they were beginning in a film by Walter Salles, and I know the feeling. And you really want him to like you. and they were like, one, Barbara is totally unique, is Analu, the smoker. And she's unique, she never delivers a line the way she's supposed to deliver, so we were totally in love with her. And Luisa, she's tense. And when we did the scene in the ice cream after the father dies, and that Eunice discovered that he is dead, and she takes the family to the ice cream scene, it's like 100 extras, the whole thing, camera, live, and you have to be concentrated. In cinema, you have to protect yourself from all the noise. So they did my scene, I was fine, I said, I have it. Then they moved the camera to Luisa, and I could see that Luisa was terrified. And she looked at me, and she was like frozen. And I told her, it's hard, isn't it? When this whole thing moves towards you. And I felt like it was so beautiful, and that's how they became my kids. And then the boy, the boy is like, one day the mother was around, and I saw him, and I said, he's gonna fuck so many people. And then I saw the mother, and I said, why people bring children to movies, you see, to sets? It's not a good environment. And then you had the genius, the last one, the Cora. Cora was a genius, and she's very special. And I remember the day was shooting the scene where they are removing the furniture, and it was the last day that we're shooting in that house because everything was so chronological. And it was also the last day of her experience, her first experience as an actress. And that was a stolen shot by Walter. He saw that was happening, this mixture between the actress and the character, and he stole a shot. So the film, and also the last day I saw Selton, my beloved friend Selton, when the police took him, they really took him, and I never saw him again. And all of that helped so much in the reality that this film was able to imprint, I think. Long talker.
It almost has the texture and intention of a kind of a documentary, and you're a documentary too.
It's really all about texture. It is. But interestingly, as you were talking, I was thinking about how, in fact, that initial light and confusion, because the camera spouses movement at the very beginning. Again, it's the memory I have of that space, how much that gives you what we call in Portuguese, estar no mundo, a way of being in the world, and and that gives, what that relays is not only how they are, but what is going to be lost. Because when the military police get into that house and take Humins away, it's that state of being in the world that will never be again, you know. And it's also, for me, a possible future of Brazil that is also being taken away at that point, you know. And from that moment on, the grammar of the film changes completely, because everything becomes about the beginning is so lively, but from that moment on, everything is about subtraction. The subtraction of light because they close the windows. There's a subtraction of sound because the sound is muffled, because the house is closed. You don't listen to music anymore. And there's another thing that dictatorship actually have an impact on is language itself, because you can't express yourself freely anymore. And this is why the scene you're referring to, in which the girls, the narrative becomes much more subjective from that moment on, because you have to look at the eyes of the other person to understand what is happening, you know. And this is why every single character from that moment on becomes what is non-verbal becomes more important than what is verbalized.
I have something to ask you, because it's very strange nowadays. We do these screenings, but everybody's like shooting, and sometimes you say something here, and you have been, we have been trying to make this film being seen for so long, and we are like in the end of this journey. And I would love you to ask you, because I made a joke with a child. And I really want to sleep today without thinking that you will post it.
No sharing.
Destroying the whole thing about this film. So nowadays it's really difficult. So I'd like to beg you, really, to keep it among us here. Can I trust you?
Thank you. I have a million follow-up questions, but maybe we can take one question from the audience. We need to make it a good one. It's over here, the orange hat. You.
The orange.
Yeah, I got inspired just by the talk right now and changed my question. I'm interested in, Walter, for you towards Fernanda, what was the moment that you saw that she knows what this character is all about in terms of the introspection? Because you told me like, okay, a little less. What was the shot? What was that one shot that you told her, okay, I don't have to say anymore. She incorporated that, that person, and I'm just here like,
It's a good question. And
Everyone heard the question? Okay.
It's really the consequence of a long process, I would say. There's a wonderful Brazilian writer, Clarice Lispector, who says that to write for her is about escavar, how do you say that?
Carving.
Carve until you find the essence of things. So in this character, and you see that I had the luck to know personally, there was an inner strength, an extraordinary inner strength, like a volcano that is alive, that never erupts totally, but she's so pertinent and she's capable of finding forms of resistance that were unheard of. And I think that she finds that in the light of the beginning of her life in the film. The idea of the smile is really something that she grabs from what's left from that beginning in her own memory, you know. And by cobbling, you really have the sense of when you have reached something that is the essence of it, you know. And Fernanda, she's my co-author in everything. She was my co-author in the first one we did together in Foreign Land. She was my co-author here. She's my first violin.
No, but we invite
and because of that, because you were such an extraordinary first violin, you know, the orchestra, you can actually direct the orchestra because you know where you are. If there's one scene that can somehow explain that, I think it's a scene that contains a really interesting moral question, which is when she's interrogated in the military headquarters. She learns in the same scene that she asks for a lawyer, and the guy said, no lawyer. Okay, this is when she understands the true nature of what a military dictatorship is, number one. Then she understands that the husband hasn't confided with her, was perhaps protecting her, but perhaps not, but he also had a moral question because he wanted to help and he wanted to put the family in danger. And so she understands that there were secrets and lies in that family, you know? And everything comes layer after layer, and you can see in Fernanda's face, the movements are so precise, and yet, you know, nothing is underlined, you know? And that's so beautiful because it's like a Giacometti, you know, where the sculpture, just with some traits, you can see the figure, the whole figure. This is how it was constructed, really good, really clarice lispector.
But I agree, that was the scene when I felt that now I have her, now she's here, because before she's a housewife, then she's a woman trying to control a situation that is totally out of control, but she still thinks that her life can come back. In the prison, she understands that her previous life is over. And that is the moment when she becomes herself. It's a very interesting character because it's someone who becomes herself because of a tragedy and during a tragedy. So that was the scene.
Do we have time for